So guys, I recently got a copy of FMBlog's The Art of Football Management, a comprehensive guide that applies the principles of Sun Tzu's Art of War in Football Manager. I'm halfway through the book and I'll share with you in this video 7 key principles from the art of football management that you must apply in Football Manager. Before we get into it, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're new. It helps support the channel. Key principle number 1, know your expectations. My Hull City save in the Premier League currently, it's a perfect example to try to explain this principle because we're not one of the best teams in the league. One too many times in Football Manager, I find myself in an underdog team or a mid-table side like this, and then I'm trying my best to outplay the opposition, try to outplay most of the teams that are better than me in the league. I kid you not, that's one of the fastest ways to unhappiness in Football Manager because you will struggle. And looking at Hull City and where we are ranked with in relation to all the other teams in the league, we are one of the worst teams in the league. Even the 3 promoted teams are given a better chance at finishing higher up the table than we are. But what the point I'm trying to make is, when you're playing in the league, you have to see where you rank up with all the other teams that you're playing against. And then if the teams that you're playing against are a lot better than you, have to be slightly more cautious in your approach on how you go about creating your system and how you go about creating your tactics. You can't just create a tactic that's going to be overly expansive and overly exposed, and that might just cause you to concede too many goals, and then you might end up losing more matches than you're supposed to lose. But you can see my tactic here for Hull City. I'm using a cautious 4-3-3 system, and so far so good. That has kind of kept us way above water, and then over time, as you continue to play the game, as your team continues to get better, you can go on to improve your tactic and change it to a more expansive, more attacking style of play. Key principle number 2, you have to win matches. What the book calls chapter 2 is the waging of war. The idea behind this system is that when you're playing in Football Manager, for example, there are 3 groups of people you have to impress: the players, the board, and the fans. So what you're going to do is to try to understand what each of these categories or what each of these groups are expecting from you. You can go into your club vision, and then for some reason you can see the board and the supporters. This is quite clear enough. For my board in Hull City, they're expecting me to sign Turkish players. I haven't been doing so well in that category, but we've done well to play entertaining soccer, attacking soccer, and counter-attacking soccer. For the supporters, they're expecting us to play entertaining soccer, defensively solid soccer, and counter-attacking. So I find my way to try to keep everything going well, keep everybody happy, keep everybody impressed. And the other group of people, the players, are the other group that are more tricky to try to impress. What you're going to do is to go into the players, go on to check your promises, and also I've made a lot of promises, and for some reason I've managed to keep most of them as well. But another place to check on your players' happiness and this kind of stuff, you can look at your club dynamics here. You can see the team cohesion, club atmosphere, and then leadership support. Remember that your leadership support with the players has to be all the way up. It shows that your players are buying into your activity, buying into what you're doing as a manager. And then you can also check the happiness column to make sure that everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet. And you can see here in Hull City, despite everything going not so fancy like I wanted it to go, most of my players are still content. The summary of that is that a happy squad brings you brings you better results, and you can actually overachieve when all your players are doing well and playing happily, working towards the same goal. Key principle number 3, have an attacking plan. He whose ranks are united in purpose will be victorious. Sun Tzu. To mount an effective attack in Football Manager, you have to understand the principles of 5 lanes. Made famous by Pep Guardiola, this idea that the pitch is divided into 5 horizontal zones and 5 vertical zones. From what I've noticed, each zone has to be taken into consideration when building a tactic and when building your attacking strategy. It covers roles. This also covers formations and how to go through your squad and try to figure out how you're going to put everything together and try to create a system that works and that can actually get you goals. After going through your squad, you can find your best players and build a tactic that allows them to play to their strengths. In the book, the example was Everton, and they had Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So in that sense, Calvert-Lewin is a tall striker, and for some reason you can use him as a target forward or maybe as a pressing forward. Key principle number 4, blocks. That is the laziest approach I've actually gone with to name a chapter title, but there it goes. While attacking is important, defending will help you secure points, and it will help you pick up 1-1 draws here and there and help you keep you afloat and not get relegated if you're using a very weak team. Chapter 4 further emphasizes on the importance of not always going too attacking when you're playing against teams like Manchester City. When you're playing against elite level teams, you don't always have to go to try and hit them goal for goal, because you'll be so exposed at the back that at some point they're going to score you. It also makes reference to the fact that you cannot just keep your team on one mentality like I have here on cautious, Often I try to jump into the balanced mentality, but I see that my team is doing quite well in most games. Sometimes if we're doing badly, I tend to go to very defensive or very defensive. So the book also informs you that there's some phases in the game where you have to switch up your mentality or switch down your mentality depending on the scenario that is going on in the match. You can't always expect to plug in one tactic and then use it all through the season and decide to win the league. That it's not that simple in Football Manager, and I don't think it's that simple in War either. Now, making reference to blocks, there are 3 kinds of blocks in Football Manager that you can build on. By default, looking at my team here, I'm using a low block with a high defensive line. This is somewhat a custom block. It's a mid block, but it's custom and it's slightly lower. The default block would be to use a standard defensive line, and if I can just get it to standard, a standard defensive line like this and a mid block. This is the default mid block setting. It means that you have your team compressed in the middle of the field and then you're trying to win the ball back in the middle of the field. The low block is going to employ a lower defensive line and then a lower line of engagement like this, and then the high block is the third type of block in Football Manager, and then you can go for a high press and a high defensive line or a much higher defensive line. So those are 3 ways you can actually go and set up your team. And if your team is aggressive and you have very strong players up front that can run and win possession early, you can use a high press. But if your players are not very fast at the back, you don't have very quick players, then using a high press is going to be a very big problem because your defenders cannot track back. So if you have short defenders that are not so, they're not so good in the air, but they have some pace, you can use a much higher defensive line or a high defensive line like this and play with a high press. Or if you don't have very good strikers, but you have quick defenders that are not so tall, you can use a mid block like this with a high defensive line. That sort of works as well in Football Manager. So there are many ways you can go about designing this. And if you have tall defenders and your players can win balls in the air, you can show your position outside and try to force them to cross the ball. And then you have a lower defensive line and a mid block or a low block like this, like what I was using a standard higher defensive line. So have something like this with a low block and then urge the opposition to try to cross the ball, knowing that your tall defenders are going to get there and win the header before the opposition strikers. The book also emphasizes that you have to compare your defenders to the opposition strikers on the match day. Looking at Middlesbrough, for example, I don't know who they're going to start, but looking at their strikers, I can see currently there's a player here in just filtering everybody by their name, and then I'm going to scroll to the main striker in Marko Milinovic. I'm going to assume he is the main striker. He has oh my god, he's 6'5". Middlesbrough's main striker is 6'5". Okay, I'm going to compare him with my own defenders now, and then I see that Callum Doyle is 6'3", so he is the tallest player in my team, and he's not as tall as a Middlesbrough striker. So we have a problem there already. And then Diakite is also 6'1", not as tall as a Middlesbrough striker. So that means that using a low block with a standard defensive line to force the opposition to try to cross the ball is not a very good plan when I'm going to go against Middlesbrough. So I'm going to have to change something. So that's kind of how the team is going to set up. And if I look at, what's his name again? Come back here. Marko Milinovic. His pace is about 15 and 14. So wow, he's an absolute monster. So anyway, the point is I'm going to have to design a system that is going to allow me to stop that striker from scoring. So playing with a mid block now, because I don't want to be too high. The player has some pace, so I don't want to be too high. I'm just going to have a mid block to try to win the ball back in the middle of this field. That's kind of how using blocks tends to work in Football Manager, and then that's the knowledge that I gained from chapter 4. It's quite a long. I've actually spent quite a time in chapter 4 as well. Key principle number 5 is a tricky one. It's not really talked about a lot in Football Manager, but it's something I'm going to try to swim through real quick. You're going to go to the squad, and the idea behind this chapter is how you use the players at your disposal, how you use the forces that you have. So the idea behind this is that you have a group of players, yeah? And Alexander Tesic is one of my strikers right now. I have this Berito player here. What you're going to observe that all my players have is that they're all young players. I think the oldest player in my squad is Unazi, the Moroccan, and then he's 28. So this is a problem, and then I also have another 28-year-old here in Brendan Fleming. This is a problem that my team have, that we all have a lot of young players in the team, and then not a lot of 35-year-olds, James Milner type players. So if you go into the dynamics of the team here, the idea about using your forces is you have to check who your key players are in the team. So this is my team hierarchy. You have to go on to check this menu a lot. You have team leaders in the team, and then Doyle, Fleming, and Diakite. These are the players that are going to carry your team, and you need to make sure that these players are determined professional players, model citizens, they're key players in the team, and then when you're taking care of these players, when you're interacting with these players, you don't want to get any of these players offended. If these players are unhappy in your team, it's going to filter down and then cause all the other players to be unhappy. So you have to find a way to keep these players happy and keep them playing all the time. Make sure that they also have good mental abilities, like you can see professional, determined, professional here, and then John Jules is balanced somewhat. And then you can see the other highly influential players, they have resolute, and most of them are balanced as well. Get good players in this category. Make sure that your influential players are good players and try to keep them happy a lot. These are the players that you're going to use, and then try to pay attention to what those players can do. Like Diakite now is one of my main central defenders. I'm going to play him as a central defender on defend. Often you might see him on the right hand side, but you want to keep him here where he's going to be happy playing where he wants to play. You need to know his attributes. Like Diakite now is a central defender on defend. On Football Manager, you see a lot of players use double ball playing defenders, but in Diakite's case, he's not a ball playing defender, so there's no point for me trying to use him as a ball playing defender. That's just going to cause us more problems in defense. So in my tactics, I went on to select Diakite to play as a central defender on defend. You have to do this with most of the best players in your team and try to build your system like that. Key principle number 6 has to do with the opposition and how the team that you're playing against, your enemy during the war. So what's going to happen is that the title of this key principle is the weakness and strength. If you go into your data hub and then you go into the next opposition tab, you can see the overview of the next team they're playing against. I'm coming up against Middlesbrough, and then they have some good players. We already looked at Milovanovic, the striker that is somehow tall and fast at the same time. What you want to do is to go on to check the team scout report and then ask, for example, in this case, I'm going to ask my assistant to bring me a scout report and then look at the opposition and see how strong they are, see where their weaknesses is, see where their strength is. Look at their key players, like we already mentioned, their striker. You can go on to look at this opposition's expected style of play, look at who their tackling defenders are, what do these defenders have in their arsenal that makes them so good. And then we have a defender here in Daniel Amate. He's a fullback, but he's not very fast, so that's a sort of weakness that we can exploit. We can have a fast player play that wing to try and stop him from, try and take advantage of the slow pace that Daniel Amate has at his 33 years of, currently 33. Before we get into the 7th principle, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get your copy of The Art of Football Management, first of all, remember to leave a like for the video and check the description. I'm going to attach a link so you can go on to grab your copy of The Art of Football Management from the FMBlog website. It's great value for the ebook that you find, and then the principle goes in depth to try to explain all the principles that I explained here. There are a lot more than just 7. I just wanted to pick the first 7 because I'm currently in chapter 7 of the book, heading into chapter 8, and you're going to learn a whole lot more of how to apply these principles with examples and everything, screenshots, everything is all in there. Feel free to grab a copy for yourself. Principle number 7, avoid conflict. If you can find a way to create chances and score goals without interference from the opposition, you have won. Now imagine that you get 10 penalties in a match. That's highly unlikely, by the way, but just imagine that you get 10 penalties in a game. It means you have a chance to score 10 direct goals. That's where set pieces do come in. So you can go on to your team's set piece routines, and then first of all check your corner takers, your free kick takers. Make sure that everybody that is selected to take those set piece routines, they're actually capable of taking them. I have Julien Gemero here and Joe Boss. Those are my direct free kick takers, and they're very good at taking free kicks as well. You can go on to filter this by attacking free kicks to attacking corners and see who your best corner taker is in the team. And then you can see here in Tommy Doyle, Kieran Dowell and Paul Galdames. They are the 2 or 3 players that I have taking corners for my team. So make sure you have this all set up, and make sure you do it every single game as well. Go into your corner setup like this and make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you have everybody where they're supposed to be. For example, I have a far post corner here. Make sure that the player that is standing far post is tall enough and has good jumping reach, good strength, good heading that can actually help him win the ball in the far post. Make sure the player that is crossing the corner has good crossing as well. You can see Kieran Dowell has crossing 14. You can do this for all your set piece routines, and you have to do that every single game because the opposition is changing. So you can have a player that is here, and then in Rainer is 6'1", and then in the next game Rainer is not going to be available, so you're going to have a different player here. You need to make sure that the player that is playing here is also tall enough to actually play that position, and if he's not, make sure you get somebody else that is tall enough that can fill that gap. So that's basically, you do that for all your set piece routines. If you really go in depth, I know a lot of Football Manager players don't really go in depth into set pieces, but according to the book, it's very, very important if you want to win the war. So I'm actually going on to apply more and more this time in my Football Manager career. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video and also to subscribe to the channel if you aren't already subscribed. If we get 150 likes on this video, I'll go on to make part 2 of the video covering the remaining principles found in the art of football management. And remember to check the link in the description to go on to grab a copy of the book for yourself. I'll see you in the next video.